Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're stepping into a world that, honestly, very few people ever see. And let's be real, even fewer would ever voluntarily enter. I want you to just imagine for a second that you're strapping on heavy, steel-toed boots to start your morning shift. You take a deep breath, walk through those massive metal gates, and as they clang shut and lock behind you, well, you are officially locked inside some of the most incredibly dangerous and overcrowded penitentiaries on the entire planet. This isn't just a 9-to-5 job, right? It's a meticulously calculated daily fight for survival. So today we're going to break down the extreme risks, the really intense security protocols, and the massive psychological toll of keeping order in a place where total chaos is literally just one unlocked doorway.
So how do you actually survive a 12-hour shift when you're outnumbered 30-1? Picture this. You're standing in a massive concrete corridor. It's late morning, the sun is just beating down mercilessly, and the temperature inside these cages is sweltering, well over 30 degrees Celsius, which is pushing 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's humid. Let's say you're stationed at Urso Blanco, a notoriously tough pretrial prison. On your shift, there are exactly 19 guards, and you're responsible for nearly 600 inmates. Just let that math sink in for a second. 1 guard for every 30 prisoners. You are so heavily outnumbered in an environment where deadly riots and gang warfare can absolutely explode in a fraction of a second. You have to maintain total control because you know that even the tiniest lapse in attention could cost you everything.
And for stepping into this literal war zone, for putting your life on the line every single time you punch that clock, your reward is roughly $500 a month. That's what a starting guard makes, which is basically just over half the average income in Brazil. I mean, think about the stakes we were just talking about. You're managing hundreds of highly volatile inmates, many of whom belong to rival drug syndicates, fighting for control both inside and outside those walls. And for $500 a month, you are literally the only line of defense standing between organized crime and absolute total anarchy.
Okay, let's dive into this reality, because it is wildly different from how things work in the rest of the world. In a lot of standard global prison systems, you might patrol a cell block carrying, a baton, maybe some pepper spray, and a radio. But here, in Brazil, the threat level dictates a drastically different approach. Instead of a baton, you are carrying a pump-action shotgun. Now, normally, each rifle is loaded with special anti-riot rubber ammunition, but crucially, and this is a big deal, you can seamlessly swap that out for live, lethal ammunition in an instant. Because in facilities like Urso Blanco, which has historically seen some of the absolute deadliest riots in the country, armed deterrence isn't just an option, it's the only way you're keeping things under control.
Now, you might be wondering how you actually operate day-to-day with stakes this high. Well, in places like Maximum Security Prison 603, your survival relies entirely on one golden rule: reduce direct contact to 0. It's called the minimum contact protocol. So when you need to unlock a block for courtyard exercise, it's not just turning a key, it is a highly choreographed routine. First, you unlock the mechanism on the lower floor, but, and here's the trick, the cell door doesn't open yet. Second, you instantly retreat, getting completely clear of the cell front. Finally, only when you are completely out of reach, a second guard stationed safely up on the second floor pops the upper locks to release the inmates. It's a brilliant double-locking mechanism. It guarantees that when that cage finally opens, there is no guard standing right there for an inmate to grab or pull in.
But honestly, even with these brilliant, fail-safe protocols, the underlying tension is just immense. Listen to what senior guard Antonio warns his team during their morning briefing. He says, "It sometimes feels like a kind of competition among the prisoners. Who can kill someone?" And he's saying this right as they prep for the morning sunbath. That's the 2 hours the inmates get out in the courtyard. Antonio calls this the absolute worst moment of the day. Statistically speaking, it is, for sure, the most dangerous part of your entire shift. It's this tiny, hyper-tense window where prisoners are out of their cramped cells, freely moving around, and the risk of an orchestrated hit, an escape, or a weapon grab is just off the charts.
Now, while the inmates are out catching some sun, you're going to work. And what's really fascinating here is the sheer ingenuity of the inmates and the massive paranoia it creates for you during these midday cell searches. Your job is to literally tear apart the empty cells hunting for improvised weapons, and they hide them everywhere. I mean, they will painstakingly hollow out solid concrete ceilings and floors and camouflage the holes. They rip up their own clothes and weave the strings into clotheslines, running them between cell windows like some sort of homemade postal service. Mattresses? Prime real estate for hiding deadly shivs. You have to poke and prod absolutely everything with a knife, because you know full well if you miss a single self-made weapon, you could very well be its first victim.
And this brilliantly illustrates the kind of crazy creativity you're up against.
Imagine you're patrolling the inner courtyard, right? You're keeping an eye out for contraband getting tossed over the exterior walls. Suddenly, this heavy, normal-looking chunk of stone hits the concrete, and boom, it shatters. And inside, it's packed with smuggled cell phones and drugs. The outside smuggling networks are getting unbelievably sophisticated. They're flying drones, they're crafting these perfect fake hollow rocks to drop illicit goods straight into the yard. And a cheap burner phone inside these walls is worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars because it lets gang leaders keep running their empires from behind bars. You are just constantly playing defense against these incredibly inventive tactics.
And the vulnerability doesn't stop at the courtyard walls. Even lunchtime brings massive risks. See, most of these prisons don't cook their own food for the general population. It's all outsourced to external catering companies, and that supply chain is a massive, gaping weak point. Gangs are constantly trying to bribe the drivers or infiltrate the kitchens to sneak goods in. So, how do you stop it? You use X-ray density analysis. Every single food cart that rolls in has to be meticulously X-rayed. The tech is pretty cool. It differentiates between the low density of organic stuff, like rice and beans, and the high density of concealed electronics or narcotics. And thank goodness for it, because if you miss a single blip on that monitor, the entire power dynamic inside the prison could flip in an afternoon.
But the darkest reality of this job, and this is a heavy one, is that no matter how intense your searches are or how high-tech those X-ray scanners might be, the danger is always, always there. There's this horrifying true story of a guard at one of these facilities. Somehow, an inmate managed to get a real gun smuggled into the main wing. The inmate completely blended into the dark shadows of those claustrophobic cell blocks, just totally unseen. And as the guard walked past, the prisoner fired. And the tragic part? The bullet hit the guard perfectly in the side of his torso. It struck the exact tiny little sliver of his body where the heavy bulletproof vest offered zero protection. It's just a brutally sobering reminder that inside these walls, a single tiny mistake, or honestly, just sheer bad luck, can be fatal.
So because that threat is hanging over your head 24/7, your preparation has to be absolutely relentless. We're talking extreme riot prep. You and your team are doing live-fire tactical training, you're running tear gas deployment drills, and rehearsing tactical retreat maneuvers. But here's the most fascinating part about this. You conduct these super loud, explosive drills right smack in the middle of the prison complex. Why there? Because you want the prisoners to hear it. You want the echoing commands, the rapid succession of gunfire ringing in their ears. It acts as this massive psychological deterrent. It's a very loud, very clear message to the gangs. We are trained, we are armed, and we are completely ready to shut down an uprising the second it starts.
So the crucial point here is, the nightmare doesn't just magically end when your shift is over. When you clock out, you don't really get to leave the danger behind. Guard Kasia experienced this in the most terrifying way possible. She said, "On my front door, someone wrote that prison officers will die. My family got very scared, and we had to move to another neighborhood." Just think about that. Because she chose to work in law enforcement, drug cartels tracked her down and targeted her actual home. She literally had to pack up her life, grab her 2 daughters, and flee to an entirely new neighborhood just to stay alive. The psychological toll of constantly checking your rearview mirror, of being suspicious of every single person walking down your street, it's just immense.
The terror just completely bleeds into civilian life. And we're not just talking about graffiti or vandalism here. The stakes are astronomically high. These drug gangs will stop at absolutely nothing to break your morale. They threaten guards out in public, and horrifically, they even threaten to snatch guards' children while they're playing at a park or walking home from school. I mean, how do you even function? Imagine trying to stay hyper-focused on managing a volatile cell block of 600 gang members, knowing full well that your worst enemies are out there, actively hunting your family in the free world. It is a level of stress and sacrifice that is almost impossible for most of us to even comprehend.
And yet, despite the incredibly low pay, the sweltering heat, the constant, lingering threat of death, and the absolute terror directed at your family, your resilience just has to be astounding. As one female guard put it perfectly right after finishing this grueling night shift, "The first thing I'll do when I get home is hug my daughters, because today was pretty exhausting." It's such a quiet, beautiful, and honestly heartbreaking statement. Because when you strip away the heavy bulletproof vests, the pump-action shotguns, and all those intense tactical protocols, you're all just ordinary people. Your mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters, just trying to survive 12 hours in hell so you can go back home to the people you love.
So I really want to leave you with a provocative question today. Could you do it? Could you endure this kind of daily psychological toll, willingly locking yourself inside a concrete box with hundreds of violent offenders, totally outgunned and massively outnumbered, risking not just your own life, but the lives of your family, just to keep society safe? It really pulls back the curtain on the hidden, extreme cost of law enforcement in the world's most dangerous environments. So the next time we talk about the justice system, I think we have to remember the men and women standing right there on the very edge, holding the line for the rest of us. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it gave you an entirely new perspective. Keep learning, and I'll catch